Hello everyone, I'm going to explain in this video regarding the movements in the time of gas exchange and what movements are required for gas exchange in the alveolus. Okay, so let's go. This is the structure of lungs, and we have two lungs, left and right lungs. And then there is another structure here that is bringing air to our lung, which is called trachea. So, inhaled air passes into the lungs through a rigid tube called the windpipe or trachea. So this is how the air comes in through trachea. The trachea branches left and right into tubes known as bronchi. So trachea branches left and right, and which is called bronchi, and each of these is called bronchus. So bronchi, like nuclei, like something with the I, showing the plural form of the word, and that's why we call bronchi, because we have two bronchus, and each of them is one bronchus, as you can see, bronchus. Bronchi divide further into smaller tubes as called bronchioles. So each bronchus, left and right, then they are dividing into smaller tiny as called bronchioles. And bronchioles, you see, bronchioles. And the smallest bronchioles end in groups of alveoli, which are tiny sacs. So these are alveoli. These are tiny sacs. In the human lung, alveoli are the sites of gas exchange. So we have, once again, trachea ends up with two bronchus. So we call bronchi because there are two bronchus, and each bronchus again go and divide into bronchiole. And bronchioles, these are bronchioles, and each bronchiole ends up with the tiny sacs, which are called alveoli, and each alveoli also has lots of alveolus. So the same as bronchi, bronchus, alveoli, alveolus. Alveoli, alveolus, and bronchi, bronchus, and bronchus, another tiny one, which is bronchiole. Okay, and bronchiole will end up with at the end of the bronchiole. Then we have alveoli, and alveoli again alveolus. So maybe you can I can put it like here. So starting from here. And before here also you can start from trachea. So yeah, that's it. So trachea, bronchi, bronchus, bronchiole, and then alveoli, alveolus. And at the surface of alveolus, then the gas exchange will happen. Okay. So these movements occur in alveoli. This is a structure of one alveolus. So the whole is in alveolus, one alveolus, and these are the cells of the alveolus wall. And you can see the red arrow and blue arrow. The red arrow shows the inhaled air, which includes the oxygen. So oxygen is coming in to the alveolus, and at the surface of the alveolus there are capillaries. Here these are capillary, this is capillary, and inside the capillaries are blood cells, hemoglobins, and which is a part of the blood cell, and these cells are responsible for carrying oxygen. So the oxygen, after inhaling, comes into the surface of the alveolus, and then because of the gradient, highly concentration of the gradient of the oxygen over here, then that would be the diffusion, simple diffusion will happen, and the oxygen goes out and will be carried by the hemoglobin cells. And in return, you will see that the blue arrow which send the carbon dioxide in. So at the same time, the oxygen goes out and the carbon dioxide goes in. And as a result, for inhalation, the oxygen goes in, and then in exhalation, the carbon dioxide goes out. So that's why we have carbon dioxide exchange, and goes out, and the oxygen goes in. I'm going to read this together. During inhalation, the alveolus expands and air is drawn in from the bronchioles. During exhalation, the alveolus decreases in volume and air is forced out into the bronchioles. Blood flows through the capillaries adjacent to the alveolus wall. Another thing that is important is the result of this inhalation and exhalation into your blood cells. So once your blood cells will be carried out by capillaries, they get the oxygen and they release the carbon dioxide. And the blood cells coming from this side are having carbon dioxide. You see the blue arrow. This means these blood cells is the deoxygenated blood carrying carbon dioxide. Do you remember this blood is coming from where? Pause the video and think. Do you still remember the pulmonary system? Yes, I'm sure you remember. So these are the blood deoxygenated, and they don't have oxygen or less oxygen and more carbon dioxide. So they are coming here, and then they receive the oxygen and they release the carbon dioxide. And what happens when they are leaving capillaries over here? Yes, then they have the oxygenated blood. It's pretty happy blood cells because their target is now should be pumped into your body cells. And do you remember where does this happen? Pause the video, always. Great. Yeah, so the oxygenated blood will be pumped out through your left ventricle into your bodies because they have already the oxygen sent out. So yeah, that's it.
Many of us have hundreds of things on our minds at any moment, often struggling to keep track of everything we need to do. But fortunately, there's one important thing we don't have to worry about remembering: breathing. When you breathe, you transport oxygen to the body's cells to keep them working, and clear your system of the carbon dioxide that this work generates. Breathing, in other words, keeps the body alive. So how do we accomplish this crucial and complex task without even thinking about it? The answer lies in our body's respiratory system. Like any machinery, it consists of specialized components and requires a trigger to start functioning. Here, the components are the structures and tissues making up the lungs, as well as the various other respiratory organs connected to them. And to get this machine moving, we need the autonomic nervous system, our brain's unconscious control center for the vital functions. As the body prepares to take in oxygen-rich air, this system sends a signal to the muscles around your lungs, flattening the diaphragm and contracting the intercostal muscles between your ribs to create more space for the lungs to expand. Air then whooshes into your nose and mouth, through your trachea, and into the bronchi that split at the trachea's base, with one entering each lung. Like tree branches, these small tubes divide into thousands of tinier passages, called bronchioles. It's tempting to think of the lungs as huge balloons, but instead of being hollow, they're actually spongy inside, with the bronchioles running throughout the parenchyma tissue. At the end of each bronchiole is a little air sac called an alveolus, wrapped in capillaries full of red blood cells containing special proteins called hemoglobin. The air you've breathed in fills these sacs, causing the lungs to inflate. Here is where the vital exchange occurs. At this point, the capillaries are packed with carbon dioxide, and the air sacs are full of oxygen. But due to the basic process of diffusion, the molecules of each gas want to move to a place where there is a lower concentration of their kind. So as oxygen crosses over to the capillaries, the hemoglobin grabs it up, while the carbon dioxide is unloaded into the lungs. The oxygen-rich hemoglobin is then transported throughout the body via the bloodstream. But what do our lungs do with all that carbon dioxide? Exhale it, of course. The autonomic nervous system kicks in again, causing the diaphragm to ball up and the intercostal muscles to relax, making the chest cavity smaller and forcing the lungs to compress. The carbon dioxide-rich air is expelled, and the cycle begins again. So that's how these spongy organs keep our bodies efficiently supplied with air. Lungs inhale and exhale between 15 and 25 times a minute, which amounts to an incredible 10,000 liters of air each day. That's a lot of work, but don't sweat it. Your lungs and your autonomic nervous system have got it covered.
Here's the question. How does each of these movements increase the rate of gas exchange in alveoli? You should include the concept of concentration gradient in your answer. Pause the video and answer this. How does air pollution affect gas exchange? There are two pictures, the left side and the right side. What do you think about these? Which one do you think it is normal? Yeah, this is a little bit, it doesn't feel normal. Okay, so yes, you guessed right. The left one is normal, which is bronchiole, but the right side is someone who got asthma symptom. What are the asthma symptoms? An inflamed, constricted one with mucus buildup in a person that's suffering from asthma. Okay, so don't worry about that, about these words. We are going to talk about asthma a little more.
What is asthma? This information is brought to you by the American Lung Association. People with asthma have hypersensitive airways. Their lungs react to things that may not bother other people. Asthma can cause significant changes within the airway, all of which narrow the opening, making it difficult to breathe. This is how the airway looks in an airway without asthma. The airway is pink and clear, with no interior swelling, and the muscle bands around the airways are not tight. There is no mucus overproduction. Air moves freely through the open airway. Untreated or poorly controlled asthma can cause changes in the airway that may be irreversible. When you have asthma, three main changes can occur in your lungs. The first is inflammation. This makes airway tissue irritated, red, and swollen. When you have asthma, inflammation is always there, even when you are not experiencing symptoms. When the tissue becomes inflamed, the airway narrows and airflow is decreased. The second change is bronchoconstriction. This is the tightening of muscles that surround your airways, further reducing the opening. The third and final change that occurs is an increase in the secretion of mucus, which further blocks the airway. When someone with asthma comes in contact with an asthma trigger, such as pollen or tobacco smoke, one or all three of the processes, inflammation, constriction, increased mucus production, can occur, all of which contribute to the narrowing of the airway. This is known as an asthma attack or episode. Thank you for viewing this animation from the American Lung Association.
It starts with a cough or a wheeze. Soon, your chest feels tight. Your breathing speeds up and gets shallower, making you feel short of breath. These are common symptoms of an asthma attack. Around the world, more than 300 million people suffer from asthma, and around 250,000 people die from it each year. But why do people get asthma, and how can this disease be deadly? Asthma affects the respiratory system, particularly the smaller airways, such as the bronchi and bronchioles. These airways have an inner lining called the mucosa that's surrounded by a layer of smooth muscle. In people with asthma, the airways are chronically inflamed, which can make them hyperresponsive to certain triggers. Some of the many asthma triggers include tobacco smoke, pollen, dust, fragrances, exercise, cold weather, stress, and even the common cold. When people with asthma are exposed to these triggers, an asthma attack or exacerbation can occur. But how exactly do such everyday factors lead to an asthma attack? If an asthmatic is exposed to a trigger, the smooth rings of muscle that circle the small airways in their lungs contract and become narrow. Simultaneously, the trigger worsens inflammation, causing the mucosal lining to become more swollen and secrete more mucus. Under normal conditions, the body uses this mucus to trap and clear particles, like pollen or dust. But during an asthma attack, it blocks the narrowed airways, making it even harder to breathe. These effects lead to the symptoms of asthma. Smooth muscle constriction results in the feeling of chest tightness. Excess mucus and increased inflammation can cause coughing, and the wheezing noise? That happens because as the airways constrict, air whistles as it passes through the narrowed space. These symptoms may make a person feel like they're running out of air. Yet counterintuitively, during an asthma attack, the inflammation can make it harder to exhale than inhale. Over time, this leads to an excess of air in the lungs, a phenomenon known as hyperinflation. The trapping of air inside the lungs forces the body to work harder to move air in and out of them. Over time, this can lead to reduced oxygen delivery to the body's organs and tissues. Sometimes, in untreated severe asthma attacks, the body can't keep up, which can lead to death from lack of oxygen. So how do we prevent these uncomfortable and potentially fatal attacks in people who have asthma? One way is to reduce the presence of triggers. Unfortunately, the world is an unpredictable place, and exposure to triggers can't always be controlled. This is where inhalers, the primary treatment for asthma, come in. These medications help asthmatics both control and prevent their asthma symptoms. Inhalers transport medication along the affected airways, using a liquid mist or fine powder to treat the problem at its source. They come in two forms. There are reliever medications, which treat symptoms immediately and contain beta agonists. Beta agonists relax constricted muscles, allowing the airways to widen so more air can travel into and out of the lungs. The other form of inhalers serve as preventive medications, which treat asthma symptoms over the long term and contain corticosteroids. Corticosteroids reduce airway sensitivity and inflammation, so asthma can be kept under control. They're also crucial in preventing long-term damage from chronic inflammation, which can cause scarring of the airways. Inhalers are known to be very effective and have helped many people live better lives. Although we've come a long way in improving how we treat and diagnose asthma, we still don't know its exact causes. We currently believe that a combination of genetic and environmental factors play a role, potentially acting during early childhood. Recent research has even linked poverty to asthma incidence. This may be due to reasons ranging from exposure to additional pollutants and environmental irritants to difficulties in obtaining medical care or treatment. As our understanding of asthma improves, we can continue to find better ways to keep people's airways happy and healthy.
Okay, time to think, pair, share. However, there's no one that we can pair, but just imagine that there's someone that we can share, okay? But you try to think about by yourself and answer the questions. Predict what the symptoms of asthma might be, okay? Pause the video, don't forget. Why do people suffering from asthma find it difficult to recover after exercise? Pause the video and answer. How does asthma restrict the movement of air? Great, you did it right. All the answers are in the video, so don't expect me to write down the answers for you, okay? Great. So I'm going to read this part because it's not something that very specific. We have already discussed the first part. Smoking, cooking on stoves that burn wood, and the burning of fossil fuels for transportation elevates the level of particulates in inhaled air. Inhaling these airborne particles may cause lung diseases, including cancer, emphysema, and asthma. So these are the things that you also watched in the video. The surface of the trachea is made up of cells with hair-like cilia. This is something new about the cilia, and this is the picture that shows the surface of the trachea with pollen, which is the pink one, or pollen, and dust captured by hair-like cilia. So we have over here pollen, and these are dusts, and these are pollens. Together with mucus, these cilia serve to trap airborne particles. I think if you go back to the video, you will see that the function of the mucus. Then, by beating upwards in a wave-like movement, they remove foreign matter from the airways and lungs. So they remove foreign matter. Air pollutants can stop the movement of the cilia, so they do not continue to expel harmful materials. That's what happens because of the air pollutants. So, asthma is a long-term lung condition in which the bronchioles are inflamed and narrowed, making it harder to breathe normally. An estimated of 300 million of world's population have asthma, and in some countries it is the most common long-term disease affecting all age groups. During an asthma episode, inflamed bronchioles react to environmental triggers such as smoke, dust, or pollen, which can lead to an immune reaction that causes breathing difficulties. Yes, here we go. And that's the end of this slide and the presentation. Goodbye.